Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mr. Productivity Podcast. Hey, before I introduce my guest, hop on over to my website, MrProductivity.com, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. There you can sign up for my email newsletter, get a whole bunch of other cool stuff, MrProductivity.com. On the show today, Andrea Johnson, and we're going to talk about a topic I really love because I always say happy people are productive people, and she is going to talk to us about optimism. But before we get started, Andrea, who are you and why should we listen to you?
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. I am Andrea Johnson. I am the Intentional Optimist, and I call myself a transformational leadership coach. And my passion is equipping especially female leaders, but I end up working with a lot of other leaders and founders of their own companies to define a new culture by trusting their own ability to think critically, create imaginatively, and lead effectively by uncovering their core values, understanding how they communicate using DISC, and looking at some life principles that they might want to use to live out all of those goals and strengths with excellence. I call mine the 6 tenets of intentional optimism.
Thank you for being brief. I've had some guests a number of years ago who thought 30-second introduction meant 30 minutes. And I had to stop the podcast. I'm like, hey, only you and your mom are going to listen to you talk about yourself for 30 minutes. It wasn't 30 minutes, but it was a lot longer than 30 seconds. So let's start off with optimism, because I'll be completely honest with you. When I first got into the productivity space, I thought it was just calendar apps and to-do lists. Now I understand it has to do with health and wellness, and it has to do with your mental state, your attitude. And if you are an Eeyore, now, no apologies, I'm 59. I grew up with Winnie the Pooh. If you're not familiar with Winnie the Pooh, go to YouTube, type in Winnie the Pooh. There's several characters. There's Winnie the Pooh, who is a bear who didn't wear pants. I don't think that would happen today.
Short, stout, and proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah. He just wanted this honey and he wanted to be happy. And then there's Piglet, who's not a fat guy. He's a little tiny pig. And then there's Christopher Robin. And then my wife reminded me there's Owl. And then my favorite character, the one I identify with, Tigger. If you ever listen to this episode,
I'm me.
very hyperactive. Yeah. And then there's Eeyore. Now, we love Eeyore, but Eeyore is... It's never going to work out. I'm never going to land a client. My business is going to go bankrupt.
Nothing matters.
Yeah. So tell us why you think, not what AI tells us, not what Google tells us. Why does Andrea Johnson think it's so important to be intentionally optimistic?
If you take a look at your social media feed, if you take a look at your interest rates, if you take a look at crime rates or anybody that's talking to us from the media, Mark, they tell us that literally the world is going all downhill in a handbasket on like speed skates. And the reality is it's not. And so I started out looking for a way to be a little bit more realistic. But what I realized was I'm actually very hopeful. And so when we have hope for the future, we actually make plans. When we have an optimistic viewpoint, it doesn't need to be, and people ask me this all the time, what's the difference between intentional optimism and toxic optimism? Toxic optimism takes nothing into account. Intentional optimism realizes there's going to be challenges. There are going to be roadblocks. There are going to be things we need to plan around. It encompasses this idea of owl is your wisdom, right? Christopher Robin is the planner, or actually Rabbit is the planner.
Oh, forgot about Rabbit.
Yeah, don't forget about Rabbit. You wouldn't have anything to eat without Rabbit, because we're big Winnie the Pooh fans as well. But when I look at what I need to succeed in the future, I need to have reminders on a daily basis to be hopeful, to be present, to let my courage be exercised in a way that helps others flourish, not just myself. And that's why I think it's important that we at least embrace some kind of intentionality with the way we look at the future. And for me, that's optimism.
I love that, how you explained that. And one of my favorite words, let me explain where I'm going with this. One of my favorite words is curmudgeon, because I identify as Tigger, but if things don't go my way, I turn into a curmudgeon. And my wife will say, hey, Mr. Curmudgeon, you want to get MrCurmudgeon.com? And so I want to tell people that even Winnie the Poohs, even Tiggers, even Owls and Christopher Robins, we all have bad days. if you're going to a networking event, you're going to some kind of meeting, and you get pulled over by the officer of the law, it's very difficult, if not strange, to be Winnie the Pooh or Tigger in that moment. So I don't want people to say, I always am happy. No, you're not. If someone dies in your family, I'm like, yay, my mom died. No, you're not going to do that. So I think people need to realize that nobody is always happy. However, you and I both know people who are always Eeyore.
Sure. And it's super easy to always be Eeyore. Are you familiar at all with the Enneagram?
I'm a little bit. Go ahead and explain it
so
for
I'm
me.
An Enneagram. Okay. I am an Enneagram 6, and it is 9 different types looking at the world from different perspectives. And the Enneagram 6 is the loyalist. They're the person that can look down the road and see everything that's going to go wrong. That a lot of people, and then of course we're afraid of things, but instead, a lot of people look at that and think, then I'll walk into a meeting and say, that's not going to work, and that's not going to work, and that's not going to work. So I had to learn how to take that future ability to see the future things, what happens when the dominoes fall, and say, all right, in order to avoid those, this is the path we need to take. So it's a very proactive kind of life. Whereas my dad looks at the dominoes falling and all he can see is Armageddon. And it's, if you sneeze over here, the world will end eventually. That's just how it's going to work. And I think it's really easy to get caught in that. And especially if things, maybe you've had a hard life, right? We all have a story. We all have something that, at least one thing that we've been through that was difficult. When we just starting to talk about my story when I was doing interviews surprised me. I didn't realize there were so many things that could be either inspirational to other people or lend them encouragement because of the things that I've been through. And when we have the grace to give ourselves and others, then we can start sharing our intentional optimism and pin the tail back on Eeyore, even when his little house falls down and he says, not that it matters. The rest of us, like Winnie the Pooh or Piglet, even though Piglet's terrified of everything, can then start helping people to see the sun coming up the next day. And I just recorded my own podcast. And one of the things because I doing so many of these interviews, and podcasters ask the most brilliant questions. And I can't wait to see all of the wonderful ones you're going to ask, because we have these amazing conversations that bring out the best in each other. And this is one of the best ways to foster hope for the future. So what I said to my audience was, these are questions you need to be asking yourself too. And one of them was, how do you want your legacy to show up? And so it makes you think about things. And when you start putting those things in practice, it's amazing how much hope you can actually manufacture or discover is actually just waiting there dormant under the surface. And when you do that, everything looks better. And one of the ways I give myself grace is I say, all right, the sun has gone down. Tomorrow's another day. And because everything for me looks better in the sunrise, and my body has the ability to sleep and restore itself a little bit because I'm no longer as young as I used to be. And being able to do that, I wake up as, okay, I can actually face my bank account today. I can actually face scheduling all of my payments, or I can face the marketing plan that I should have done last week. I can face dealing with this team member that is really difficult. That helps a lot. And when I have these kinds of things in place intentionally, then I have the ability to make a plan for all those things that come down the pike.
I think words have a lot to do with our optimism. I once heard Tony Robbins tell the story where many years ago, he was in business with 2 other people, and somebody made a mistake and there was a lot of money lost. And the one guy was really angry. He wanted to kill people and he wanted to sue people. And Tony's in between. This is unfortunate. Oh my gosh, we got ripped off. And then his other partners, he's just sitting there. And finally, Tony goes, aren't you upset? He goes, this is a little inconvenient. It was like $50 million, some crazy number like that. And Tony goes, it's inconvenient? And the guy goes, maybe a better word is peeved. And Tony goes, peeved? And the problem is, they lost a lot of money, but it's gone. What's happened. The guy said, what is the point of getting angry, letting our blood pressure go through the roof, maybe causing ourselves having health issues? It happened. It sucks that it happened. But hey, maybe we should just say, you know what? I ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere. Oh, this is inconvenient. Or I got a speeding ticket. Well, I'm peeved. Maybe if we use different words, because I think a lot of us think that trash talk is for sports. A lot of people do self-trash talk. I'm a moron. I'm stupid. And that's not getting you anywhere.
Yeah, can I share a personal story on that particular aspect or that particular point? I shared with you before we started recording that I just came through almost 6 weeks of being sick, and it turned out it was pneumonia, and I canceled everything. I am a solopreneur, right? So if we're talking to small and medium-sized business owners, this is something that hits us all, right? So if you're especially a very small team or someone like me who's a solopreneur, when I don't work, Mark, I don't get paid. I'd have a contract in place or something that's a recurring payment, but I got so discouraged knowing full well that as soon as I was better, I could reschedule my clients. I could reschedule my meetings. I could reschedule my interviews like we're doing today. And I knew all of that, but I got so discouraged. And so sometimes not just using specific words, but just being willing to say it out loud and being willing to say, I am so discouraged. And I looked at my husband and I said, I think I might need to express this and just be discouraged about it for a minute. And he said, it's going to be okay. And of course, in the meantime, I'm still doing behind the scenes work. I actually built a website while I was sick, but I didn't acknowledge that. And being able to turn around and say, oh, I did these things. So having practices in place makes a difference too. Being able to say, yeah, I feel like I didn't do any work and no money came in the door, or this is my smallest month in the smallest revenue month in a year. Being able to turn around and say, but I built a website on the back end because I did it 30 minutes at a time, even though I was sick. And little things like that, when we can use different words, when we can say it out loud to somebody, and when we can then look back at all of the small steps that we took, even though whatever it is, even though I ran out of gas, even though, then that builds our resilience. And it builds our courage to take the next steps. Because getting back in the swing of things was almost harder than being out. It was a mess. I had a friend who said, oh, I bet you're just trying to get your footing this week. I said, no, that was last week. I felt untethered. It was just weird. Wait a minute, what's going on? So this is yet another reason for the intentionality piece.
I'm a huge football fan. And when I say football, the real football, we call it soccer in America. We call it football in the rest of the world. So 2 years ago, I fell in love with football. And one of the things I really love about football, they have yellow cards and red cards. If you foul someone, you get a yellow card, 2 yellow cards, or if it's egregious, you get a red card, you boot it out. I have not done this yet, but I want to go get myself a couple of those yellow, they're referee packs. They got a yellow card, red card. And as a talking point, so if someone's out there talking smack themselves, I can pull a yellow card and it'll be a good talking point. What are you doing? I'm giving you a yellow card. And of course I have to explain yellow card and my love for football, but I'm like, hey, you got to stop talking smack about yourself. If you're talking crap about yourself, why should anybody else talk good about you? And it's very difficult to be optimistic and be productive when you're like, I can never do it. This podcast's going to fail. The internet's going to go out. I know my clients are all going to leave me. Then all you do is you tie yourself up in knots over and over again. And then you wonder at the end of the day, if you're a journaler like I am, and you ask, how was my day? And you're like, oh, I got nothing done, because you were tied up in knots because you did it to yourself. And I think we need to be very careful of the words we speak to ourselves, either out loud or internally, because you may think, it's no big deal. Your subconscious mind hears everything.
And the one voice that you hear the most and that you recognize the most and that you give the most authority to is your own. It's not your mom's. It's not your spouse. It's not your kids. It's not your boss. It's yours every single time. And it matters that much. I'll even say to my son, because he's 15, and he'll say, I was so stupid, or I'm just so dumb. It's like 15 trying to learn Spanish. And so, sorry, but nobody talks to my kid that way. And it'll get him out of himself, and he'll say, oh yeah, sorry. Because I'm like, you're talking about my son, right? If you can't recognize how you're talking to yourself, I'm going to help you recognize that you matter to me and that you have value to having a team around us or having other people that will help us do that. So I think your yellow card is a great idea.
What I think is amazing, if we talk to ourselves much more critically than we would ever talk to anybody else. And maybe we need to keep the voice memo app running on our phone 24/7 or whenever we're awake and see how we're actually talking to ourselves. Because I think most people, if you ask them, hey, do you talk smack to yourself? Nah. Okay, record yourself all day. You will be mortally offended.
I use Marco Polo. I don't know if you have heard of that one, but it's an app where I talk. It's a little bit like FaceTime, only it's not live. So I can talk back and forth to friends. And a lot of us will talk to each other in the car. And what's so interesting is how much smack talk we talk in the car, not just to other people, but to ourselves. And what's funny is I have friends and I'll say, gosh, you really hate people. And they're like, I do not. I would never hate people. I'm like, go back and listen to your Marco Polo. It's right there. It's all recorded. Right. So I think that's a great idea when we do that. And sometimes, like when I'm helping people learn how to express because when I work with people to help them go from disempowered to magnetic as a leader, trying to express for the first time core values that they have or the way that they need to be spoken to in a business setting and setting boundaries for the first time. A lot of times I'll tell them, record yourself talking to yourself in order to do that, because you're going to hear where you'll stumble. Not only are you going to hear the ways that you're probably saying words that you shouldn't be saying, but you're going to hear the things that you're going to hear the way you stumble over your words, but you're also then going to be reinforced with your own message. So not only listen for the way you talk smack, but then turn it around and talk. Back in the 70s, they had those tapes that you'd fall asleep to with the really positive stuff. Maybe it was Tony Robbins. And I don't even know who did it all. But those things matter, right? Because you're right. Our subconscious doesn't know the difference. It just hears it all.
So what I do before I go to bed, I have this routine. I go screens off at 7:30. I'm asleep at 8:30 every night, up 4:30, 5 o'clock. Sleeping in late for me is 5:15. That's what I do. It's my pattern I got into. And what I try to do is at the end of the day, I'm journaling and I'm just pouring my thoughts out on the page, because I don't want my brain to be thinking about these things that maybe went wrong during the day. I want my brain to think about something else. And so the brain is very interesting, because when it sees that you have written something down, it can say, okay, I can let this go. But if you don't write it down, your brain is trying to hold on to all these things. And the more things it tries to hold on to, it's like a juggler with too many balls or too many bowling pins. And you got to help your brain out, because when your brain is overwhelmed, then the optimism starts going from optimism over to the other side. It's like your optimism fuel tank is going from full to empty. And so I think just doing a brain dump at the end of the day, or writing out, hey, these are the issues that I had today. I didn't do this well today. What could I have done different? What could I have said differently? But a lot of people, they grab their phone and they live on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube for the last hour of the day. No, don't do that. Go in your own little world. I like reading a print book, or I like reading my books on Kindle. I like to... My body knows when I pick up my Kindle, we're 30 minutes away from bedtime. And it's amazing, but don't read like people getting murdered books, okay? You want your body to go into sleep rested. Yes, I said you want your brain to be rested from what? Rested from stress, so you can sleep better. I can tell you, I've done this and it works. I tell my wife, if we're going to have a heated discussion, I'm like, hey, the last 2 hours before bed, no, unless it's about the house blowing up or something like that, because what it does, it raises your cortisol, raises all the negative emotions. Then you can't go to sleep. So it takes, I like how you say intentional optimism. It takes intentionality in order to become optimist. You can't just say, I'm going to be happy today. You have to make a choice, and you have to practice it throughout the day, because we live in a negative world. You have social media apps, you have news apps, and if you're not careful, you can really easily go from Winnie the Pooh or Tigger into the Eeyore world.
It's like those, and I think that's what we see a lot of too, is we see a lot of fear. I had one of those nights last night that my brain just wouldn't shut off. And it was just all these to-do things, and being able to get up and write things down. I actually do something to settle my brain with some meditation. And it's actually, I do a little stretching, which is yoga. It's because I'm getting older. And the more I sit, the more I need to stretch. And so it's really just 8 or 9 minutes. And it's called Lectio 365. So depending on what you want, this one is actually a like Bible reading and prayer. And it just really settles my brain and really settles my heart. And I do some deep breathing. And by the time I'm ready to lay down, we're on the same floor as my son, and he'll come in and flip on the light. I'm like, oh, seriously? I have to start all over. And so I feel you. That kind of thing really matters. Our bodies get on rhythms, and it's not just going to bed rhythms. There are other things. These are like basic habit formation. I'm a big James Clear fan with Atomic Habits, and he talks about setting yourself up to succeed. And so when you're doing those things for you to go to bed, your body, your brain, everything is like, oh, we get in a habit and we don't have to remember everything. It just automatically says, this is the next thing, this is the next thing, and this is the next thing. And we can do that mentally. We can set up triggers for when something happens, how to think in a different way. Or like I keep little notebooks all over the place. I do. And it just, sometimes you're right. I may not even need to do anything about whatever it is that I'm worried about. I just need to write it down, and then it's out of my brain. And it frees up space. And then I have the ability to move forward.
I just recorded a video for social media not too long ago. Actually, it was today, but you're watching this next week. But anyways, and I was sharing my morning routine because people are always asking me, what is Mr. Productivity's morning routine? And I say I have different routines depending on the day. I have 2 different routines. So on my weightlifting days, I wake up, I do 1 push-up. I do a proper push-up, not a cheater's push-up, not a lazy push-up. I do 1 push-up. Then I squat for 4 minutes. I read a book called Built to Move, and it says as you get older, our hip flexors, we're sitting behind computers so long, and I squat with my butt as close to the ground as I can for 4 minutes. And then after that,
wait. Do you just stay down there?
Yes.
Oh, see, I grew up in Korea.
Okay.
And we call that the kimchi squat. Everybody can do it up till 100 years old. They just sit that way. They learn to sit exactly that way.
And a lot of people can't do it anymore. So I do it minimum 4 minutes. Then I don't like the gym because you got to get dressed. You got to drive to the gym. You got to find a parking spot. So I have 10, 15, and 20 pound weights in my bedroom. So when I'm done with the other 2 things, I grab my 2 20-pound dumbbells. And I will literally do farmer's walks I'm up to 6.5 minutes now. And the other day I was recording a video for my friend. I'm like, oh my gosh, my shoulders are developing. It's amazing when you work out.
What's a farmer's walk?
That's when you grab 2 heavy weights and you just walk for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. And it just pulls in muscle. And it feels really good. Then I do 2 sets of 45-second kettlebell swings. I have a 25-pound kettlebell. Now on non-weightlifting days, what I do is I will ground. Well, I do this every day. I ground for 10 to 15 minutes. This is when I'm posting my first videos of the day. And then I go for a 2-mile run. I've been running at least 1 mile every day since August 29, 2017. On my weightlifting days, I actually, after I'm done with my farmer's carry and my kettlebell swings, I do about 5 to 10 minutes of actual weightlifting with the dumbbells. I'm 59 years young, and I have done enough research on the blue zones, on people who are living into their hundreds. Yeah. And the one key thing is these people are very active. So yes, easy things you can do. You go to the mall, go to the store, don't look for the closest parking spot. Park far out and walk in. We need to be more active. If you want to live a long, healthy, long life, you got to stay active. I've seen people who live in these blue zones, 100 years old, women walking upstairs, carrying things because they're staying active. You are not going to live a long life eating Doritos and sitting behind a Zoom call. You're going to have to get out and move. I'm at a standing desk right now because the book Built to Move says we should aim to sit 6 hours or less a day. Now, we're not talking about sleeping. Don't sleep standing up. Get a standing desk. Walk around every hour. Get up and walk around 2 or 3 minutes. My wife bought me a rebounder for our anniversary. So when I want to get some movement, I just rebound for 5 minutes. You got to keep the body moving because when you're taking care of yourself, it's a lot easier to be optimistic and be productive than if you feel lethargic.
Yeah. And when I get into, I actually have different health goals. I have lost 180 some odd pounds. I
Oh,
had
good for
gastric
you.
bypass surgery. Well, I had gastric bypass surgery in 19 years ago. So 2005. So in March of next year, it'll be 20 years. And I've
Wow.
maintained it. And so for me, part of that being healthy is eating well and getting enough protein in and doing those kinds of things. But how caring for ourselves, being present is not just being present for others. It's being present for me. Having a sense of wonder is not just about others. It's about me. Being wise and generous and kind is about me. So all of the work that I do to live out my core values and my strengths with other people first have to be applied with me. And I too would love to live to 100. So I'm going to actually get at this book, Built to Move, and I don't know if your audience always gets these gems, but if y'all haven't given him like a 5-star review, you need to, because he's asking great questions and putting some great stuff out there. But that's the mindset to be able to do all these things, because that could sound really overwhelming. A lot of these things can sound very overwhelming. Not everybody needs to go to bed at 8:30 and get up at 4:30. That's your rhythm. But everybody has a rhythm, and we need to find out what it is. And having that courage to go look inside and say, what is my rhythm? What is my difference? How am I unique in this world? What is it that I bring to the table? I like to tell people that if you don't bring to the table what you're supposed to bring, meaning if you do not live out the strengths and the purpose that you were created with, then the rest of us are missing out on whatever special dish you were supposed to bring. And if you like a big holiday meal, I'm a charcuterie board person, but if you like a big holiday meal with all the special food, think about if somebody didn't bring the turkey to Thanksgiving dinner, or it's like, I think it's really important. And Mr. Productivity, a lot of these things, you just put ideas out there because of what you do. But I'm sure you don't tell everybody you have to do everything I do. I'm sure that's why you have guests on your show, to be able to say, there are other ways of doing things, but there are certain principles that you need to incorporate. And one of them is being willing to spend time on yourself. And so that's where we meet. That's where our work meets. And so I'm excited to see where else we can go with this.
The reason why I laughed, because you were talking about dinner, and I'm like, when people tell me, I went to this potluck dinner at my friend's house, there's nothing for me to eat there. I don't like the food. What did you bring? You should have one thing that you like, because you brought it. But you alluded to something I really like. I'm a big fan of simplicity. So when people go, oh my gosh, you do this and then, whoa. One thing, pick one thing that either I or Andrea said, and say, okay, I'm going to try to implement this into my life. So when people tell me I can't create a morning routine because I've got kids and this, that, whoa, wait. I have clients that have 4 kids and they have a morning routine. They get up a little earlier. Here's a great idea. This is going to be mind-blowing to people. You put your kids to bed at 8 o'clock, go to bed. Why are you staying up to midnight for? When I tell people these things, they look at me like, huh? What about time with my wife? What if I want, do you want to get up early and kill the day? Or do you want to step and watch late night show? You get to choose. But when your kids go to bed, you and your wife can go to bed. And that way you get 8 hours of sleep, get up early before the kids and get more stuff done. So I really struggle with people who make excuses. I don't care what your familial situation is. There's a way you can craft a morning routine that will work for you and your very unique situation. Stop going what Eeyore would say, I can't get it to work. You can get it to work. It may take you a couple weeks to get a piece of paper out and try new things, but there is a way you can make it work for you. Stop going toward the negative. Figure out, how can I? Don't say it won't work. Say, how can I make it work?
Yeah. And it might take you a few weeks, but it also might take you a year, because I read Miracle Morning and I was like, I have to do all this stuff. And so because I'm just one of those people, oh, this sounds really good. And I could get so much done if I would just do these things. And you get in the Facebook group, and it's a great book. And if you can implement all of that, oh my gosh, talk about productive. But for me, I know the things that I need in the morning, and I do better when I do the things that are very reflective in the morning, and then I exercise. So my routine is different from yours. But if people listen to yours, it actually is very simple. One push-up, it's just one push-up. But for me, it's usually walking, and I do lifting weights every other day. But for me, it's the reflection time that I need in the morning. When I wake up, my brain is so fresh and I can process so many things. So I do my reflection time then. But part of what is very important in my work is to help people understand that one of the tenets of living out intentional optimism is being energetic. It is the excitement for life. It is understanding what it means to be industrious. I have a really good friend who's a coach. And when I was developing these back in, it's funny you say 8/29/17, that's my birthday. And so on my birthday, you started your process. But
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But 2017 was a rough year for us. My mother died in February. We're in Charlottesville, and the 2017 Unite the Right thing happened. It was violent here. There was early in August. And by my birthday, it was just like, I was checking out. I was like, And so it became a time when I was in the reflection process. When you started your thing, I was really reflecting. And what I realized is that I need to have an industrious bent. I need to be able to say, if this doesn't work, what will? And you said, if not, what is it? Something not, but how? And I've used that phrase too. It's not what I can't make it work, but how can I make it work? I think that's what it was. But how can I is the main question. But being willing to say, if I need to be able to show up for my family better, because a lot of times we think putting our kids first or putting our spouse first means that we're being a servant, or it means that we're being kind and present. You go back to the old fashioned, put the oxygen mask on you first.
Yep.
And that feels selfish sometimes, especially depending on the worldview that you come from. I come from an evangelical Christian perspective, and that sounds very selfish, especially for a woman. But the reality is, if I have nothing in like you talked about your battery. If my battery is empty, I have no energy to give. I'm willing to say, all right, I have to build my energy. There's certain things that I have to cut out and certain things that I have to put in. And having the energy for life means that I can then share it with other people. It means I have joy to share. It means I have excitement to share. That builds energy, even if you're tired. You haven't gotten enough sleep, because it's mental and it's emotional. We're whole beings. We're not just physical beings. We're not just mental. We are body, mind, soul, and spirit. And if we don't feed all of that, then it will fall apart. And you're talking to the productivity aspect doesn't just feed your work productivity. It feeds everything.
Yep.
It makes everything better. And so that's just yet another reason is we have to be willing to say the energy in the space matters. And if I have to step back and do something differently in order to have different energy, it's just for a season. Right. My son is about to start 10th grade, and I'm ready to start traveling the world again. This mom is ready to go. I grew up overseas. It's really hard for me. The fact that my husband and son still do not have passports keeps me up at night. It bothers me. But we're flying out in 2 weeks for a vacation, and I'm like, I can't wait to get on a plane. But knowing that it's only 3 years until he's done with high school, it's like, I can wait 3 years to be a world traveler again. And yet, so I'm starting to make plans. And so I'm being industrious about it. And I'm saying, what can I do in the meantime to build my relationship with my son so he wants to go with me? What can I do in those areas? This is what it means to be hopeful for the future. It doesn't have to be, I hope that it doesn't rain tomorrow, or I hope that I get my finances in order. If you don't take any of the right steps for your finances or your health or your business, nothing's going to change. So sorry, I just got off a little bit of a rant.
No, I appreciate that. And when you're talking about traveling, I remember a couple of years ago, I saw a video from Steve Harvey from Family Feud. And he was talking about once you fly first class, you'll never be able to fly into coach. So we are going to go visit my mom. My mom had Alzheimer's at the time. It was actually a month before she passed away. And my wife was booking plane tickets. And she goes, do you want to fly first class? I said, yes, I want to fly first class. And I'll tell you, Andrea, what was amazing is the number of people who go out and buy expensive cars. They have all the streaming services. They spend, I don't know, $20 a day at Starbucks. They're like, why would you buy first class? I'm like, first of all, it's not your money. Okay.
We all make our own choices.
Second of all, it makes me happy. I don't collect Air Jordans. I don't collect baseball cards. I like to fly first class. Now, I'll tell you, I love flying first class, and I've done it twice. It's unbelievable. Although now people are telling me Try first class internationally on some of the European airlines. It puts the American Airlines to shame.
Oh, it looks
But
amazing. I can't wait.
It's amazing. The first time my wife and I, we're standing in like line number 1. Ooh, we got line 1. We're flying on United, right? And then I'm sitting there myself, okay, the people who are disabled, okay, then the veterans. And then we got on the plane like last. I'm like, wait a minute. We had the bigger seats. We sat in the front of the plane, so we got there first. But I'm like, I thought first class people got in first. They got to have a meal. But now they let all these other people on. And people like, if you got kids, and of course, everybody says, I got a kid. This is my teddy bear. I told my wife, this is hysterical. Okay, we're first class. And we got on like about 80% after the plane was full. Now, to be fair, we have our own overhead. We didn't have to worry about that. We had the bigger seats. But I just thought it was comical that we got on like 80% when the plane was full. But my point is, when people were so negative, like, why are you paying for a first class ticket? I'm like, because it brings my wife and myself joy. Why do you care? Why does it bother you? And then when I had to go back after my mother passed away a month later, I bought first class. You get treated differently. And I'm just saying, sometimes it's the little things. Maybe you like sports cars. Maybe you like to buy rare baseball cards. I like to fly first class. And next time I stay at a hotel, I'm not going to do the Holiday Inn if they even exist anymore. I'm going to go to a more expensive hotel because my wife and I, we're pretty much frugal, but we won't go out. I said, I want to do things that was going to light us up because it's not like we're going to like that 8-star hotel in Abu Dhabi every weekend. But when you go out, treat yourself. You get one shot at this thing called life. So instead of going through like Eeyore, take off your pants, not really, Winnie the Pooh or be Tigger, and do something that lights you up, because when you are happy, when you're energized, you are more productive.
Yeah. And the other thing that people don't think about in that area is that I came back more rested. Like I did a business trip in January, and going out with their first class wasn't available, but coming back, it was like, it was the same price. And I'm like, because it was like a frequent flyer thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm totally doing that. And I came back and I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I landed in Richmond, and I landed at 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh, I'm going to spend the night with my sister. No. I got in the car and I drove home. I was rested because I wasn't as harassed. I wasn't in the masses. And I said, I'm a small person. I'm 5'1", right? So I don't have a problem anymore. I used to have a problem fitting in those seats, but I don't have a problem with that. But there was something about just having a little bit more space and having a little bit more quiet and not being harassed through the entire flight that gave me the ability to drive home. So I actually got home to my family faster instead of coming.
And it's something magical when you're on the other side of the curtain, when they close that little curtain.
Stop it.
It's just me. Listen, I'm a guy. What can I say? But I'm like, for so long, I was on the south side of the curtain. Now I'm on the north
You're moving
side.
uptown.
I'm moving up.
Moving on.
It's just a little curtain.
A deluxe apartment in the sky.
Yeah. Now, my next thing is to fly internationally first class. I hear that's a totally different level.
I've been upgraded before because I grew up flying overseas. My family went as missionaries to Seoul, Korea in 1974. And so I've flown it all, but I have not flown internationally in a long time. And I'm super excited.
I can tell if you're listening to this audio podcast, I invite you to go to my ex, or not my ex-wife, go to my ex profile. Thanks, Elon.
Your ex
Facebook,
Twitter profile.
Yeah, or YouTube. And maybe someday LinkedIn will give us more than 15 minutes upload, because these podcasts go about an hour. And you got to watch how giddy Andrea is when she's talking about flying again. You can't really appreciate it on an audio podcast. So I encourage you, go look at how excited she is. Her eyes, her whole face lights up when she talks about international travel. I have not.
And I do my fingers.
Yeah, there you go. You got to see the fingers. I have not flown internationally since 2010, when I won a trip to stay at the Forbes Chateau in Belleroy, France. I didn't fly first class. I love flying, but for a while there, I lost my job in 2005, and I made almost every mistake an entrepreneur can make when they started. And so I drained most of our finances in our company, in my company, and our family. But now I'm getting to a point now where I'm like, okay, I want to start. I have so many friends around the world thanks to the internet now. They're like, come visit me, come visit me. I'm like, okay, I'm not Elon Musk. Okay, I can't see all y'all, but I definitely want to go. England's my first place I want to go visit because that's where I fell in love with football. And I'd like to go see a Man City game, but I like to go
Man
more
City,
places in the world. Yeah, I'm a big Man City, a huge Man City fan. So, Mary, this has nothing to do about optimism to a certain point, but so I watched the Euro 2024. So the season ended for the Premier League in June. Then I watched the Euro 2024. This is summer football. And now in 2 days, we're recording this on Monday, July 22nd, the Olympics start. And what they have at Summer Olympics? Football. So I will watch that. And then when that ends, then the Premier League starts. So that's the only sport I watch.
Oh, no break for you. That's amazing.
This is what drives people crazy. Again, this is what makes me happy. So I schedule my days around football. Now, most games are on Saturdays and Sundays, but like the United States is playing at 2:00 on this Wednesday, I scheduled my day around it. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. So by 2:00, I've put in a full day's worth of work. And I sit down and watch the game guilt-free. And people go, how are you being productive? I said, I promise you, I got more done in those from, I think, 7 till 2 than you got all done all day. Because it's intentionality. So if you want, it's no difference if you want to go see your kids' recital or I can't believe I'm going to say this, but my daughters are 31 and 26 and a half. And I remember when they were in elementary school, they would graduate from first grade to second grade. I'm like, I graduated once. High school. I know,
me too.
Now they graduate every grade. It's like I graduated from high school and college. That was it. But when you're an entrepreneur and you can schedule around the things you enjoy, the things that make you happy, that's only going to increase your optimism.
Right. And that's another piece of it. And this goes back to even your traveling and spending your money where you want. Wisdom is a piece of that. And being willing to say, I'm going to be wise about how I spend my time. I'm going to be wise about who I spend it with. I'm going to be wise about how I understand what's happening in my life. We're F1 fans. And so start traveling. And my nephew goes, I think we could afford to go to the Austin one. I'm like, I don't want to go to Austin one. I want to go to Monte Carlo. And my sister, because we were watching the Netflix piece, I used to be an IndyCar fan. I love to drive. I drive a BMW. I love driving. I like to see how fast we can get to 60 miles an hour or more. And my son was like, you're going to teach me how to drive, right, Mom? I said, you betcha. But being able to schedule my week and say, literally, the F1 calendar is on my calendar. It's a shared calendar. I know I probably shouldn't share my calendar with F1, but I just do. And so they tell me when the practices are and when the qualifyings are. And so what I'll do is I'll plan my week. And it's like, what is my reward this week? My reward this weekend is Saturday, I get to lay out at the pool because I have a pool. And then Sunday afternoon, I get to, in my basement, close everything and just watch the race. I got to tell you.
I love it.
Yesterday's race in Hungary was to die for. And it was amazing. But the other thing that having something that you enjoy like that does for you is it gives you the ability to see life from a totally different perspective. And for me, I'm connecting with my son because he loves cars, like from day one. That's his thing. And he doesn't really like watching the races, but now I understand a lot of his favorite is McLaren. So we go to England as well. Now that I can see everything that's involved, they don't just get out there and race, Mark. They don't get out there and play soccer. That's not what they do. There Football. Is daily. Side note, I listen to Smartless podcast, and Will Arnett is a huge football fan, right? But he actually pointed out that soccer is a British word. It's Australian word because they shorten things, and it was an acronym. I didn't know this. So anyway, I'll call it football for you. Because I grew up in Korea, so we did football, right? Where they had the World Cup there one year. But one of the things that you learn is if you talk about productivity, man, I listen to how they choose all the different teams, choose the different tire pressures and the tire hard, medium, soft. I listen to why they open the wing at this particular drag reduction zone. I listen to why they pit this one person before that person and how they literally count the seconds. And it used to take me a while to figure out why is it that this person's going to come out in number 8 when he started in number 2 if he takes a pit now? It's because they're calculating. They can look at the times and see it. These things give us not only a stress relief and not only just pure enjoyment, but they actually teach us while we're enjoying them. I am sure you have learned so many things about life and business and the way you run things while enjoying a really good Man City football game, right?
And what's interesting is the coach of Man City, Pep Guardiola, he has a very unique perspective on his players. If you want to leave, even if you're under contract, he says you can leave because he understands this is mind blowing for you leaders out there. If you're not happy here, you're not going to play efficiently. Right. I've never heard of any other coach doing that. They're like, you're under contract for another 5 years. They're like, hey, if you're not happy, if we got to get paid by the other team you're going to, which is usually not another Premier League team. It's usually like the Bundesliga or La Liga or League One or something like that. But I love that attitude because he understands if you're not happy, you're not going to play your best football. And I have never heard of another coach doing that. But when we're talking about optimism, this whole show's been about optimism. And I think that plays a very important part. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I'm going to just apply this right now to your small and medium business listeners because I managed teams. I worked in university medical systems for 22 years. I worked at Johns Hopkins and the University of Virginia, really prestigious universities. And I managed upwards of 30 people at any given time. And every single time you manage a team, so we're talking about your coach managing his football players, or if you're talking about the way you interact with anybody that works with you, if it's a contractor, a subcontractor, or people that you employ in your business, when you have someone that you are invested in making them happy and to help them flourish in order and to play to their strengths in order to make your business grow, that's a completely different animal than if you're in there like saying, no, you have to do these things only and you'll show up at this time. And it's a difference between the stick and the carrot. I literally had arguments with chairs of departments that I was with because I would hire people and I would say, these are launching pad jobs for you. This is not a landing pad. You're coming in as an administrative assistant or a clinical research coordinator, and you have the entire university at your beck and call or at your doorstep. You can move up and go. My desire is to bring you in here, create an atmosphere where everybody wants to work for me, where everybody wants to be on my team because I foster all these wonderful things in them. And then within 2 to 3 years, you go on to bigger and better things. And I had one employee who kept thinking I was trying to run him out. And I'm like, I told you this from the beginning. I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to help you grow. But almost every time someone would leave, the chair would come and sit down and say, what did you do? I'm like, I did my job. No, you didn't. Because there's a difference between managing and leading, right? You said this is a message for the leaders out there. This is why I got into this business. This is why I became a leadership coach, because I didn't want to manage anymore. Want to say, you have all this historical institutional knowledge. We need to keep you here until you retire. And we can give you a 3% raise every year. Who wants that? Some people want the stability of going in and coming home and going in and coming home. And then they do all these other things outside. That's their business. But so many more people, especially if you're an entrepreneur, clearly you want something more. Interested in something more. And you're not just interested in it for you. You're interested in it for your family. You're interested in it for your customers. You're interested in it for your team. And that attitude that you learned from the Man City coach is a beautiful thing to apply to how you work in business.
One of my favorite quotes, and I know you've heard this one before, is by Seth Godin. And he said, instead of escaping from your life, why not set up a life where you don't have to escape from? And I'm dealing with this with my 26-year-old daughter. She's, oh, it's Monday. Oh, I can't wait till the weekend. Oh, I can't wait till the 3-day weekend. I'm like, honey, I love you. You're my daughter. You mean the world to me. But you shouldn't go through life looking forward to 5 o'clock or the weekend or a week vacation. You got it reversed. You should be setting up your life so you don't need to escape from it. And I believe most people in this country look forward to vacations because they hate their life and they're focusing on the money. If you're not happy without money, you're not going to be happy with money. It'll be a quick hit of dopamine and you're like, oh, I got 3 yachts and 4 Lamborghinis and a private jet. Oh, boring, because you're not happy. You have to be happy comes from intrinsic. And I got to believe that you agree with Seth Godin.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And what I say to people, especially, oh, you should just give your daughter my podcast, by the way, because it's all for women leaders and it's all for helping people wake up. But if you find yourself, and this is what I say to people, if you find yourself in a situation where you have responsibility without authority, where you're consistently compromising on your own stuff, and I can't imagine dreading Monday morning without these things being in place. If you're dreading Monday morning, something has to change because Monday should not be any different than Wednesday or Friday or Sunday. It should be the same day because you should be the same person in all of those places. So if you feel stifled, if you feel alone, if you feel unsettled or like you're consistently unbalanced, and I don't mean work-life balance, you're consistently off balance because you're having to manage your emotions in a situation or manage your reactions to someone, if it's a coworker or a boss. These are things you really need to pay attention to. And this is what I actually call disempowered leadership. It is or principles that we've just accepted rather than developing a clear understanding of who we are and what our principles are. And I have I love working. I just actually gave another guy a quote today about being optimistic. He said, what is one of the things that makes you optimistic? And I said, I love working with millennials and Gen Z clients because they are willing to do the work and they actually see that they have enough time down the road to make some really big differences, because 1 degree change between now and tomorrow doesn't feel like a lot, but 1 degree change between now and 20 years from now is huge. You're the productivity guy, 1 degree. And if you do math, my son took geometry last year. So it was like, oh, you can really see the difference. Here, let's show this.
I will also say this, that I'm 59. I believe I'm halfway through my life. Listen to me again, listener. I'm 59 and I believe I've finally reached the halfway mark. So if you're going, oh, I'm 58, I'm almost dead. No, okay, you probably are because you think you're almost dead. I fully anticipate running a mile on my 110th birthday. And so I think instead of you going, oh, I'm 30, the big 3-0, the big 4-0, I'm like, yeah, you got 60 years left of your life. And I think now we know how to live long. We know how to take care of our bodies long. And I tell people this, and most people don't believe me. I wake up every day with the attitude as I did when I was a little boy on Christmas morning. Couldn't wait to see what Santa Claus brought me. Here it is. Right now we're at 2:30 Central Time. And I've been up since 5 o'clock. And I'm like, man, the day's almost over already because I love what I do so much. The day just, oh, it's bedtime again already. Your life should be so exciting. You get all of a sudden it's time to go to bed and you're like, man, what happened? Because not because you were bored, it's because you were so excited about what you did. You were lit up by the day. When you're excited, it goes by 5 minutes, seems 5 hours. When you're bored, 5 hours seems like an eternity.
Absolutely. And no matter how old you are, I'm 57. I will be 58 next month. And no matter how old you are, life is too short to live that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you're 17 or 70. It's too short because we're never promised tomorrow, but we could live till we're 120. And that my big turning point was at 50 when that was 2017 was my 50th. It was my 50th year. I turned 51 in August of 17, but I lost my mom. I had an 8-year-old adopted son. I was in a job that I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I knew that I couldn't manage people anymore, that I wanted something bigger and better. And I wanted to be able to give to people and to share with people and to lead and encourage people. And so for me, I was like, I need my next 50 years to look different. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I wasn't looking at 110.
By the way. And if you're listening to audio podcasts, you got to go look at Andrea on the video. Again, X, Facebook, or YouTube, because she does not look 57. I don't look 59 because I shave all the gray off every day. I look like I'm 45.
And so I've embraced it. I mean, and I did that like 2023, March of 2023. I said, I'm tired of this because I was fully gray. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to embrace it. And I won't lie. There are days I said, it's hard at the end of the day when I'm tired. I'll look in the mirror, I'll take all my makeup off. I go, oh, girl, you look old. And so I go to sleep. And so I get up the next day and I do my thing and I get dressed. I'm like, oh yeah, hey, look at that pretty, whatever. It's all natural. And I can't tell you the people that say, your hair looks so good, or things like, you don't look 57. It's, okay, then I'm just going to start believing other people. And that's part of it too, is being willing to let not just my self-talk, but let other people speak that into me.
Let me ask you this question, because this is what I experienced. So I'm fine all day long. And around 7 o'clock, my battery goes from like 80% down to 5%.
It's weird.
It's just other boom. It's my body. I'm sitting there going to watch the TV going, I'm like, it's not gradual. It's just, okay, body goes, okay, we can't do it anymore because I operate at such a high level. And my body just goes, we can't hang on anymore. It drops like a rock. And then I go to bed and I get in bed around 8:28. I'll tap my watch because it's in sleep mode. And it says 8:28. I'm like, how long is it going to take?
Yep.
Just go right to sleep.
I think that's beautiful. I'm envious of that. And right now we are in a stage in our life. My son is a night owl. And so it's like my husband and I are both morning people. And we actually did institute, going way back earlier in this conversation, we did start getting up at 5:20 because he used to wake up. But the deal is he actually is very strong ADHD. And so he has a Ferrari brain, and half the time he doesn't need as much sleep. And so he would wake up, and when he wakes up, he's on. He's like on. And so it's been a real journey to watch him blossom. It's been a real journey to learn things, but we started getting up at 5:20. Now that he finally rides the school bus, because we were driving him in and out. In high school, he started riding the school bus, and because then they can wear like earbuds and that kind of stuff. And my husband and I are like, oh my gosh, we don't have to get up at 5:20. We still get up at 6. And half the time we get up early anyway. But because he's a night owl, it's a real balancing act right now, trying to figure out how to get enough sleep because he doesn't want to go to bed. And we're in a Cape Cod. So the 2 bedrooms are right upstairs. Turn off your light, dude.
It's funny. Yeah. I never was a morning person. Then I read a book by Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. And I went from going to bed around 11:30, 12 o'clock. And I said, you know what? As a productivity guy, I'm always trying new things. And I got up and I said, I am going to try to be a 5 a.m.er. And I became a 5 a.m.er for about a year. And then my wife was working at a job and they switched her hours where she used to come home at 3 to 9, and I can't go to bed when my wife's not home because that's my protecting nature there. But then she started working with me in the business, and now I go to bed, like I said, screens off at 7:30. I journal and I read, and I fall asleep at 8:30, get up at 4:30. That's by choice. I will never tell. There's no magic to getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. If you can create magic, but you can also create magic getting up at 10 o'clock or noon. Yeah. If you're a night owl, you can create magic then. So these people say, you have to get up at 5 o'clock to be productive. No, because you get up at 5 o'clock and scroll on TikTok for 3 hours. Why do you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning for?
What's the point? It's what are you going to do with your time? And it just circles all the way back to being intentional, right? It's all about, you have to look down the road and say, where do I want to be and how am I going to get there? And I'm about to start teaching my son to drive. And my dad was a private pilot. So but part of it was, I don't look right here at my bumper. I look down there. And so I always know what's happening on the road. And so my son is going to get those kinds of instructions. And I tell this to my clients, I'm like, when you drive, you don't look right at your bumper. You have to pay attention to what's going on down there. And when you drive, you also don't just leave the steering wheel in one place. Even if you're on a straight road, you have to adjust.
Yep.
And so just being able to figure those kinds of things out on a daily basis with yourself is part of giving yourself grace. It's part of moving forward in ways that are productive.
Before we wrap up, I got one more book recommendation for you. Patrick Bet-David, Your Next 5 Moves. And the reason why I brought that up, because you said you got to be paying attention to what's ahead. Yeah. Most leaders are worried about the next move. That's great.
Right.
But you should know the next 5 moves. You should know what happens if the internet goes down. Like we had Hurricane Beryl come through a couple weeks ago.
Yes, you did.
We lost the internet a week ago. You know, you had to plan your next 5 moves. You know them. So that's another recommendation. Your next 5 moves, Patrick Bet-David. So, Andrea, it's been a great conversation. Where in the world can people go to find out about you and the magic you're doing in the world?
I am the Intentional Optimist, and that's where you can find me, either on LinkedIn or I do a little bit on Facebook, but Instagram and LinkedIn are mostly where I hang out. And you can DM me through there and tell me that you heard me here on Mark's podcast, and I'll know that you're not spam, and I will respond. But you can also just go straight to my website, theintentionaloptimist.com. That's where you can find a free core values exercise. There's a button right above my head. You can see I've got a Maxwell Live to Lead conference coming up in October, but I also it's here in Charlottesville. So if you're local, please come. But if not, I also have an online version. So there's ways to work with me there. my podcast, Stand Tall and Own It. I assume you're going to share it with your daughter.
Whether she listens to it, I have no idea, but we'll see.
It's because it's women's leadership, but it's branched out a little bit from just women as the audience, but it's all about being willing to take who you are and own your uniqueness and be willing to say, this is who I am in all of my created beauty, exactly how I was created by my creator. And I am going to now live this in a way that benefits me and everyone else. It's not about just standing in my truth. It's about how do we make the world a better place? The whole point of intentional optimism is living our goals and dreams out with excellence.
I love it. Andrea, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been an absolute delight conversation for you. Again, if you're listening to the audio version, you got to go check out the video. Look up Mark STRUCZEWSKI on Twitter. Sorry, I can't get Mr. Productivity on X because Elon hasn't given me more characters. I just need a few more, Elon, if you're listening. But on Facebook and on YouTube, Mr. Productivity, that's what you search for. And speaking of Mr. Productivity, MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. That's my website. We'll be back real soon with a brand new episode. Until then, don't forget, stay positive and stay productive.